Hi, I'm Gail Sokol, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about caramel.
Welcome to Baking Radio. Learn the art and science of baking with author, educator, and award-winning chef, Gail Sokol. Whether you've been baking your whole life or you're brand new to the world of baking and you're looking to build your confidence and learn new skills in the kitchen, you're in the right place. This is Baking Radio.
So today, I thought we would discuss caramel, and everyone is a lover of caramel, but they're scared to death of making it, and you don't have to. So let's talk a little bit about what caramel actually is. So the sugar that you put in your coffee or your tea is known as granulated sugar, right? That's a no-brainer. When granulated sugar is heated on the stovetop, because caramel is usually made from granulated sugar, when it's heated on the stovetop to the point that it melts and browns, it's got to actually brown. This cooking creates a richer, very, very complex flavor. And heating sugar to a very high temperature, usually starting around 300 degrees Fahrenheit, that's hot, and that's a high temperature, it causes many chemical reactions that creates complex flavors. And that's what we associate with caramel. And the just the wonderful flavor of it. And when you think of caramel, I'm sure we can all think of something, whether it's a candy bar, whether it's a sauce, whatever it is, we know the taste of caramel. Now, it's important to note that even candy makers, and not just bakers, but candy makers that wish to make things like nut brittles, lollipops, and any other confections they might make, sometimes the sugar is not truly caramelized. It's just heated up until it melts. So its state of matter changes. It goes from a crystalline substance to a liquid. And then when it's cooked a little bit and then it's allowed to cool down, it recrystallizes. And that's what happens when you make like a lollipop. So before or below 300 degrees Fahrenheit, sugar will melt, but it will not break down chemically. And that's where we're going next. We're heading into the science of making caramel. So sucrose, if you didn't know this, granulated sugar is actually called sucrose, chemically called sucrose. It is the chemical compound. It's known as a disaccharide because that is two simple sugars put together chemically. And what we know as granulated sugar or sucrose is actually two simple sugars that have been joined together. So it's glucose and fructose. If you took a molecule of glucose and a molecule of fructose and you put them together, you have sucrose or granulated sugar. And when they're combined and they make granulated sugar, and that's what we all know, and that's what we all are eating a little too much of, we heat this to a high temperature, this sucrose or granulated sugar, and we heat it above 300 degrees Fahrenheit, a chain of chemical reactions occurs, and it breaks the sucrose apart and creates hundreds of new compounds. And that's what causes caramelization to actually start. Now, we love caramel. Okay, I love caramel. You love caramel. But the one thing we don't like in our caramel is a gritty taste or sugar crystals in it. You don't want to taste them. How do you not taste them? Well, there's ways. We bakers and we candy makers have ways. The reason caramel does not taste gritty is because we've prevented something called crystallization from forming or from occurring. And before we talk about preventing crystals from forming, let's discuss why crystals form at all. So crystals form and crystallization occurs when only one type of sugar molecule is present. It has to be a pure substance. It has to be all glucose, all fructose, has to be one molecule, or all sucrose, one molecule. And I'm going to put it into a picture for you. So go back to your childhood. All right. Shut your eyes, go back to your childhood and picture a set of children's blocks. And only the square blocks can be stacked close together into a wall. All right. This wall would be like a crystalline substance. Now that's a pure substance, all square blocks. Now let's introduce a triangular block. If you try to build a wall using squares and triangles, not going to work, right? The wall would not stay up or packed together. So no crystallization will occur here. That's two types of sugars together. So if there's two types, no crystallization. Remember that. So the best way to prevent crystallization is to be sure there are different shapes of sugar molecules that are present, meaning you want to introduce different types of sugar into the mixture. So how do you prevent crystallization? So you get a beautifully smooth caramel? Well, we introduce a little food science or kitchen chemistry to figure it out. So there are a few ways to prevent crystallization. One way is known as inversion. And many of you that have already made caramel, you're probably already doing this and you don't even know the fancy name, but you're doing it and you're doing it successfully. So the process of inversion is when you add a small amount of an acid, like lemon juice or even cream of tartar, which is acidic, into the sugar as you heat it. That's all it is. So you're heating sugar, heating specifically granulated sugar with an acid present, and that's known as inversion. This, as you heat it to a higher temperature, it breaks the bonds of the sucrose into its two component simple sugars, okay, glucose and fructose, and it forms different complex, broken down or organic chemical substances, and crystallization will not occur. So the acid you would add would be, it's not even a teaspoon of lemon juice, very tiny amount. So for every 1 cup of sugar, you might add 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of lemon juice. That's it. Super simple. Now, another way to prevent crystallization is to add another sugar right in there with the sucrose, like corn syrup. Corn syrup is used very commonly because it basically is glucose or dextrose, same thing. And by having glucose plus sucrose, what have you now introduced? Two distinct different sugars, and crystallization will not occur. And I want to tell you, if you want to delve deeper into the subject of caramelizing sugar, go to my first book about professional baking. I have a really neat chapter on building blocks with sugar, and it really explains it really well. So this is our introduction to caramel. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to leave me a review, I would really appreciate it. If you have any questions, head on over to bakingradio.com and leave me a message. I would love to answer some of your questions on air. And next week's show, we're going to be discussing caramel, part 2.